Thank you. And I'd like to very much thank Ed for his introduction and the organizations and people who are here today hosting us again, and especially to the owners of this cafe. It's very moving to meet you and to be here with you. So we did it. We did it. So we left Vancouver on Mother's Day, and we spoke out for peace. And we spoke out about using the $50 billion defense budget to work for demilitarization, decarbonization, and decolonization. And we went all across this country meeting groups like you. We stopped in, I think, 17 cities. So we're talking about Kelowna and Regina and Calgary and Winnipeg and London and Kitchener and North Bay and Sault Ste. Marie and some cottages somebody had. And then we went on to Toronto and met people in Ottawa. In every single place we met across country, we were stopping and talking at some of the student encampments and finding out what they were doing, talking about their issues. And there are just these amazing teach-ins happening all across the world. So it was very moving to hear from the students and hear from the faculty are standing out and supporting them and calling for the end of the genocide in Gaza. And we also talked to people who were talking about what's happening in the Sudan, and we talked to people about what's happening in the Congo and what the warmongering of the Americans towards China. And we heard when we were coming back this way, just yesterday we stopped and we were just at this beautiful little craft store, and the woman started telling us about the plan to dump nuclear waste in their neighborhood and dig it into the soil, which will mean a leach into the earth and then into the waterways, and will obviously affect the whole indigenous communities in that area and anybody living in that area and their children and their grandchildren. It was these kinds of stories. And then when we were in London, this guy started a cafe, and it's also a place where he sells all kinds of organic foods. And he gathered together students and teachers and people from the women's movement and people from all over, all different sectors, working on ceasefire and working on other issues. And they just sang songs, they read poetry, they gathered and shared what they're doing to fight back. And so we told them about our idea of the peace caravan and fighting for peace and drawing in the braid of the demilitarization, decarbonization, and decolonization, and putting the money towards the TRC recommendations and towards the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited recommendations. And then by the time we finally got to Toronto, in Toronto we were met with Rachel Small from World Beyond War. I'm sure some of you know her, just an amazing, amazing organizer, fighter. And some of you probably know Setsuko Thurlow too. Setsuko is a hibakusha who survived the bombing of Hiroshima and married a Canadian professor, moved to Toronto, and she's been fighting against nuclear arms for decades. She's now into her 90s. She's won the Nobel Peace Prize for this work, and she's calling on us all to build to the 80th anniversary, which is next summer, and she's asking you to go to your municipalities and see if they'll sponsor it. Judy Rebeck joined us at the Toronto meeting we had at the Quaker Hall. So all kinds of people are sort of emerging and being energized by the fact that there's a peace caravan and there's a different way to think about it, thinking about the upcoming federal election and how do we bring our various coalitions together to set the stage for the federal election, which right now we all know is being set by the Conservatives. And we need to figure out what our issues are, find out how they speak to the people who aren't at the table, who aren't at the camps, who aren't calling on a ceasefire and an end to the genocide. So what are their issues? And we're hearing healthcare is huge, affordable housing is big, support for immigrants and refugees is really critical. Some people are getting in, some people aren't. Ukrainians are getting in, Palestinians are not. Like, what's happening with our racist foreign policy? And it's about time we put an intersectional peace lens on that work and really figure out within our organizations like this, small groups like this can do that, set what the policy is that you want for the next federal election, and figure out how does it work with the climate change movement, how does it work with the women's movement, how does it work with the homeless movement, how does it work with the immigrants and refugees that are here, and figure out that platform so that we can use it to push all the political parties, and we set the agenda. And we have to start doing it now. We have to start thinking about that election right now. And then by the time we reached Ottawa, we were joined by the Caravan that had started out in Halifax, and they'd been talking to people all the way around. And we had a teach-in with Films for Palestine, who have produced some wonderful movies. And then we had a rally on Parliament Hill at noon, and Lorelei Williams, one of the leaders of the Indigenous movement for addressing the issues of the murdered and missing women. We had we had a woman from Afghanistan who's now on the international board of Will Speak. So we had all kinds of different people talking on Parliament Hill about these issues. And we'd already sent letters to heads of all the parties and all the MPs, and not one came out. Not one came out. So we got our work ahead of us. And we were able to join the demonstrations the next day. And we did it in lots of different ways. And that's why I'd like everybody who's been part of the Caravan to talk about it, because we had such a diverse group of people on the Caravan. You met some of them when we first arrived, but I'd like to ask them to talk about their experiences and the things they learned. Another striking thing I think we would all talk about is North Bay. Brenny, and I don't know if you know her, she's been doing incredible climate change work and talking about the plastics they're dropping in Lake Superior and poisoning Lake Superior. So and there are people moving all over the place that were energized by the fact that we were going across and could share with them what other people are doing in other places across the country. And now we're heading back home. We'll stop in Calgary and then in Kelowna and meet with groups there. And we'll be holding some online Zoom events where we can share some more of this information with other speakers and be sharing information. All of it is on the not the international website, which is actually a really good website, but in the Wealth Canada's website, we'll be posting things. And if there's things you've got or documents you know of or points that you want to make that you want us to highlight or amplify, we're happy to do that. So make sure you jot down our numbers before we leave. But I'd like to, Masa, do you want to come up and talk a bit? Jace is filming this, and Jace one of these days is going to make a movie about this, and he really wants to hear your stories as well. So make sure you tell us about what you've been thinking since we last saw you.
And introduce yourself, please.
Oh, okay. My name's Ellen Woodsworth, and my great-uncle was J.S. Woodsworth, who met the unemployed workers in this town a few years back. And I'm the one who conceived of this idea because I know the unemployed workers have done this route across Canada. The Walk for Justice Sisters have done it. There's been so many people in the West Coast who don't feel heard in Ottawa, have used this as a way to talk to each other and bring our issues to Ottawa. So that's my name, and that's why I came up with this idea.
What is a highlight for you? If you were to share one highlight on a personal level, what could be something you would share?
Meetings like this. Meetings like this where we really, really talk about what are the issues, what's the future that our families see or don't see, and what are their concerns, and how do we come up with this simple rallying cries that will mobilize people for the next election. And I've seen it here in every single place we stopped. I was deeply, deeply moved by how much we all care, and we know this is a turning point. Either we turn it back now or we're in big, big trouble.
You know, it's very special to do this with a cup of coffee made with the love of my home city. My name is Masa El Katib. In English, it's Masa Katib.
in Syria, where I'm from, they dropped the L from my last name. L in Arabic is the. So my last name is Katib, or Al-Katib, which is the writer in Arabic. And my name is Masa, which is one diamond. And I'm very grateful to my maternal grandmother for having given me my name. Where am I going to start? Any curious question that could guide where I would go, or I can carve my own path.
Carve away.
Carve away. Okay. Regardless of my past, which I can come to introduce myself at some point, some of my highlights on this journey, I think, somehow align with connecting with people. I spoke with and interviewed kids as young as 4, and I spoke with older adults as old as 100. And everyone had a reflection about peace. Everybody had something to say about peace. Even the 4-year-old kid. She's from Egypt, and when I asked her, turning my Damascene accent into Egyptian so she would understand me, as Egyptian Arabic is very different than all other Arabic accents. When I asked her about peace, she said, well, this is how people greet each other. Peace. That's her upbringing. I've been collecting reflections from people on the way since we left Vancouver. Some of you already wrote in this notebook, and we had some art, which is lovely. We've had drawings and so many reflections and handwritings that are very difficult for me to encrypt. Hopefully some native English speaker can help me at some point. And for all of you to add your messages to here as well, it would be appreciated. Being on this caravan, for me, being the only person whom have lived experience of war, I am the youngest on the caravan. So I lived the revolution in Syria, which turned into an armed conflict with many countries around the world, taking Syria as a chessboard of coming to test weapons one way or another and kill my own people. Regardless of who and why, for me, killing another being is a no. And we can find solutions. When I was in Syria, in 2013, so 2 years into the revolution, sometimes, not always, but during the night were some of the quietest times. No, less bombings, less explosions, less white noise, more calmness and possibility of hearing life. And I would look at the sky, look at the stars, find peace in my own heart one way or another. And I would daydream, as daydreaming in my life has always been a way for me to maybe escape reality that I needed to take a step away from for a moment. And I would daydream of this massive magnet, giant magnet that would fly on top of Syria. And this magnet had a miraculous magical component where it could only pull up and attract weapons. And I would daydream about this magnet flying on top of Syria and all of the weapons, regardless of who has them. Just all the weapons going up to the sky. And then, at some point, if someone really wants to take the life of another, face them, face to face, fight, do something, but no, don't hide behind machinery that's really destructive to, from far away, push a button. And the reality of a collective is destroyed. Life unfolded. I left Syria. I lived in the United Arab Emirates as my host country, and I landed in Vancouver in 2018 in cherry blossom season in the spring, having sought refuge on the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. and found peace in the Salish Sea and looking up to the same stars and to the same night sky that I would identify back in my hometown, Damascus, where this coffee is from. I've been an advocate and an activist my whole journey, my whole life, ever since I was in Syria, be it for education for youth, economic empowerment for women, for refugees, marginalized communities, older adults, healthcare, anything that crossed my path, I would take it on. Give me a second. Here we go. Is this okay? When I came to Canada, I did not want to say I was a refugee, as I saw my Syrian refugees, my family, my friends, my community, my culture, being the biggest number of refugees in the world. So I got to see the world through the eyes of my people, and refugees are discriminated against all around the world, unfortunately. Knowing that refugees are not only a product of war, refugees could be coming from natural disasters. So all of us, in reality, all of you can be a refugee. All of you can be a refugee at any given second if a natural disaster happened. Hopefully not a man-made disaster, which is what we're trying to avoid in this caravan. And solutions are possible. And so when I came here, I noticed that there is something different about Canada. A, by action, and B, by my own experience. Serving on boards and committees, locally, nationally, and globally, and seeing that there is a possibility for me when I am on a decision-making table to bring my perspective that other people cannot really see because it's not their reality. They were open to listening. And maybe the change wasn't always as much as I would hoped, but there was a bit of a change in the outcome. So Canada, therefore, in 2018, broke history in Geneva and brought a refugee to the room. It was the first time in the history of humanity where a refugee was part of a delegation and part of decision-making processes that relate to refugees. And excuse me if you've heard my extreme examples before, but again, a women's conference with all men, an indigenous conference with all white people or settlers. So this has been the case for refugee communities. Coming on this caravan for me is an active participation to meaningful refugee engagement in things that relate to us. Refugee leaders around the world say nothing about us without us. And it's very important that we are part, not only from a lived experience perspective, but people who have been involved have skills, talents, gifts, connections, networks, and many things that they bring into the table to possibly steer change with the perspective of someone who lived through this experience, therefore wanting to prevent it. For me, this caravan addresses root causes. And root causes, for me, is the most important thing to address, especially at times of challenge. As much as I want to stop the end product, stop the pain, but for me, if the injury keeps being poked at, I need to address the poking, not only the pain that is coming out of the outcome. So looking at the 3 Ds with the demilitarize, decarbonize, and decolonize, from my heart, is a great alignment with addressing those root causes, therefore having a different trajectory to where the world is unfolding. I would say some of my highlights in this caravan are one of our events in Ottawa. We had an engagement with people that were coming from the Eastern Caravan, people from Ottawa, people that had traveled from across the country specifically to protest CANSEC, which is the largest military weapons fair in North America, and the caravan ourselves, who have been going through the country and talking to people. And as Ellen would say, we're carrying people's messages with us to Ottawa. So we had focus groups. We had four beautiful focus groups for the demilitarize, decarbonize, decolonize, and we had a peace art station as well. And we had an hour and a half of rich conversations where we came up with recommendations. And hopefully those recommendations, as we come back to our home base, we're going to be putting together and for them to be the open source document that will keep unfolding and growing as this peace movement is really cultivating in this present time. I wrote one more highlight I wanted to share with you. No, I'll leave that on my highlight, but one thing I wanted to say that Ellen was mentioning about that cafe in London. What was really special about the cafe in London is that it's the very first cafe/shop. So you can go in and you can buy produce, but it's the first produce that is an apartheid-free zone. So they decided that they don't want the people coming into their store to worry and think, oh, is this supporting genocide? Oh, am I going to buy this and get confused and not know what to buy? And so they decided to address the root causes. And they're the very first apartheid-free store where people can come in and feel like I'm making conscious decisions of purchasing just by being in the store. And they're starting to cultivate that movement and encourage other places to also be in apartheid-free spaces. So then we can actually hold on from that economic perspective and shake the apartheid from the place of money, which is where everyone cares for one way or another. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been on this caravan. It wasn't in my intention or in my planning. I jumped on the caravan 1 week before it started. And if anything, it's a representation to, again, the life of a refugee. Life changes, and you just have to ride the wave of presence and do the best you can with whatever life gives you. And so here I am on this caravan. I've been turning the car into a co-working space with Ellen, opening the laptop, having a hotspot from the phone, and getting social media up and running, looking into websites, trying to get news and coverage, and however I could put in my skills and experience into the caravan. It's been a very fulfilling journey for me. And I'm really excited to see what is going to come out of it, because I truly believe that this is just the beginning, like the smallest spark. And my daydream of having that massive magnet flying on top of Syria is like a seed that is sprouting through this peace movement, where my action is actually taking a step towards pulling weapons somewhere from this earth, hopefully for a good purpose. Thank you. And this is Sarah. I'll leave it.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'll keep it short. About 10 years ago, I found myself just so concerned about the number of nuclear weapons in the world. I'm an American. I'm sorry, but I am. And I decided to write 100 letters to Barack Obama, our president at the time. And I wrote and sent 99 letters. And for the last one, I decided to buy a car and wrap it in artwork that would show the world how important it was to get rid of nuclear weapons. So on my car, it's across the street, welcome to look at it after this, there are 17,085 polka dots. And I did that because when I made it in 2015, the most current data I could get was 2013, and that's the number of nuclear weapons that were in the world at that time ready to be used. 17,000. And you can't comprehend that number. So I decided to cover the car in exactly that number of dots. I counted them 3 times to make sure I had the right amount. And I color-coded them by country. And you're welcome to look at it. There's some really good news, and that is when I heard about this peace caravan, I said, I have to come along, and my car has to come along. But I looked at the current number of nuclear weapons, and it's dropped about 20%. So that's really awesome. I guess my story, what I want to share with you is that one person can do a lot. I mean, I was living, and I still am living in Portland, Oregon, and I just didn't find a peace group that matched my passion. So I just did it on my own. And I, created this book of 100 letters, the 100th letter being the car. I drove the car across the U.S. in 2015. I tried to meet with Obama. I wasn't able to, but I was able to meet with my senator and my representative. My senator came outside to look at the car and took his picture and posted it on all his social media. So I hope I can be an example of what one person can do. And thank you so much, my northern neighbor. We love you. We're going to run to you if Trump gets elected again, but hopefully not. But thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Donna. How many of you were here the first time we came around?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, hands up, please. How many of you were here the first time we came around? Okay. How many of you were not here? Okay. What I talked about the first time was that I was a newcomer to the trip. I signed up their first event, and they wondered who this woman was, and I said, okay, I can provide music. I talked about how passionate I felt about how we, on a personal level, can do a lot to turn down the tension in relationships. So my focus is what happens one-on-one. When you're traveling across the country in a group of, how many were we?
7.
7 people.
7 became 6, and then you came on board, so we stayed 7.
Okay. 7 people, picture this, 7 people, 3, then 2 vehicles. What we were doing each evening, a bit in flux, organizing where we were going to stay. Thank you very, very much, people supporting us. It could get a little tense at times. I'm sure any organization you've worked with, in your family situation, with your colleagues, you can say the same thing. So what this trip really showed for me is the power of being able to present as much of a force that can turn down the volume on tensions. This is crucial in everything we do. This is crucial in everything we do, every organization, every project, and this is what is going to move ahead change. It's not easy. Nobody's an expert. Nobody's an expert, but it's possible. I mentioned the first time around Matthew Legg's book, Are We Done Fighting? There's a chapter. At the top of the chapter is a heading. It's from a high school student writing an essay, and the high school student said, I wasn't born learning how to read and write, but they taught me how to read and write in school. That was a focus. If I can learn how to read and write, I can learn to do better in the interpersonal back and forth. I believe very strongly in that as a teacher myself, a high school English teacher, that the kids are the future, and we have to focus on helping them to be able to do this one-on-one with their buddies in the schoolroom, in the playground, and from then on in. That's where it starts. One incident that jumps out, I think one of us mentioned it, is a young woman who came to one of our events and said, you know, I was feeling really hopeless. I was feeling really helpless. And now I feel better. So that whole idea of a few people speaking their truth, who they are, sharing that they're concerned about the situation, even as simple as that, can help people feel better, get on with their lives, and maybe help turn down the volume in relationships in their world. And so it goes, right? We've had some wonderful moments. Joy, another woman on the trip, bringing her ukulele, me and my bongo drum and tambourine. We went to visit encampments. We did some singing in the encampments. Pia Massey, who is not here, our very experienced activist and arts advocate, brought her artwork into our events. And the posters that you may have saw from last time, I don't know if we had them out. We would bring those posters, those big, they were painted kids saying, "Speak for us." We would bring them to rallies, for example, in Winnipeg, various other events. In this particular Winnipeg rally, there was a big sheet with the Palestinian community holding the sheet representing the names of people killed. Children, thank you. When Pia and I think Deb, showed up carrying these, the looks, the softening of the faces, the really interested in these. This is the power of art. So whether it be music, whether it be art, Lorelei Williams was mentioned, the Indigenous advocate out of Vancouver. She spoke about bringing together some young Indigenous women, protesting downtown Vancouver on the Georgia and Granville. Downtown Vancouver. They basically started a dance going that they had practiced, blocked the traffic. They did their dance, hip hop, cool stuff, I think to a Beyonce song. And at the end of their song, they laid down on the road and each put a white sheet over them. They lay down on the road, they each put a white sheet over them. If you can picture that. Georgia and Granville, all the cars are blocked for blocks. This is the power of art. If you are artists, keep it going. You can combine your art with your activism for a very, very powerful effect. Thank you.
Well, hi everybody. I'm just going to adjust this slightly. My name is Jace Tanner, and you know, so many things are running through my head right now. I hope I can, you know, make it all sort of cohesive about what I want to say. I've been a pro-Palestinian activist for about 15 years. I'm a member of Independent Jewish Voices, which is an anti-Zionist organization within Canada. I was fortunate enough to go to Palestine on three different occasions, And my Jewish background is my mother was Jewish. I was not raised a Jew, and it was still a pretty Zionist upbringing. And I have to acknowledge that it took me many years before my eyes really opened to what was happening in that part of the world, and it wasn't actually until I went there that I really saw what was going on. And so, I came to join the Caravan because of the going down to the pro-Palestinian rallies that have been taking place pretty much every week in Vancouver outside the art gallery. And that's where I first met Ellen and found out about the Caravan. A few things stick out for me from what we've just been doing for the past, about two and a half weeks now. Kind of lost track of time. One of them was we went to CANSEC, the military trade show that takes place every year in Ottawa. And, the first day there were, I don't know, maybe roughly 150 people there, quite a few police. And, there was a car entrance. But also there's a separate place where people who didn't want to go by car, the hotels were fairly close. It was all close to the Ottawa airport. People would walk through. So myself and Donna, who was just speaking just now, we decided, well, let's go down there and just see and film the people who are walking in. And, there were two people in particular that struck me. And one of them was a man who, had a very sort of hardened look on his face, kind of non-verbally saying to us, I don't care that you're here protesting. I'm doing what I'm doing. And maybe 8 or 10 feet behind him, there was a woman who looked extremely self-conscious. And I thought to myself, now why does she feel uncomfortable? Or are we perhaps getting through to her? Or maybe she's just simply embarrassed that she knows she's on camera, and maybe one day that'll show up in a film, which is what I'm actually doing. As I think somebody has already said, I'm making a film about our trip. When was it yesterday that we were in Vermilion Bay? We just chanced to stop at a little store, and in that part of Ontario, there's the distinct possibility of nuclear waste being dumped, and the locals are very much against it. And we had an excellent conversation with the woman who was working in the store. So that and a few other people that I've had a chance to meet along the way, excellent resources, people that I know I'll be getting in touch with and getting more information from, interviewing. And on that very note, I know that Ed knows how to get a hold of us. If there's anybody who may want at some point in time to share their experience around anti-war, anti-colonization, and of course climate change, I would certainly welcome you getting in touch with me. So I think I'll just leave it at that. Sorry, I think you want to. Right. Thank you. Yes, when we were in North Bay, the woman who hosted us, she took us around to various military sites in and around North Bay. And, most of them were dated, not even necessarily functional. And one you could kind of say, well, it's sort of like a bit of a tourist trap or a tourist site. I mean, no one was trying to sell anything, but it had, I don't know, a jet fighter that I don't know what vintage it was exactly, but it was certainly nothing current. And sorry, Voodoo, yes, right, yeah. So that it doesn't exactly date it for me, but I know full well it was probably from the 60s or 70s, maybe something like that. And what can I say about it? It going there and just traveling across the country and meeting people in larger cities, some in smaller places, it really gives me the sense of how we need to be united. And what a pleasure it is for me to get, true confessions over here. I'm a little bit city oriented, namely Vancouver. I grew up in Montreal. But to recognize that ultimately people across this country, wherever they live, in a city, in a town, in a rural area, we ultimately are all going to face the same issues when it comes to the possibilities of what war could do to us and climate change. And we certainly have a huge responsibility in addressing how those of us of European descent colonized this part of the world, and of course the colonization of so many peoples in other parts of the world. I'll just end by saying that I don't think I really understood the impact of European settlers coming to Turtle Island, otherwise known as North America. I don't think I really understood what it meant until I began to understand what was happening in Palestine. So thank you very much, and I hope we can further this discussion both tonight and onwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Caravan for stopping again in Regina. It gives me hope with your messages, but it also makes me very sad that the human race is in such a mess. But thanks again for coming, and if there are any questions, please put up your hand. No? Yes, Evelyn.
What impressed me with your group is the feeling of energy that's flowing towards us. It's, I don't know whether you would call it peace energy or what, but there's something happening between the two groups. And I have a request, and this regards Edge and you people, and that our two groups stay in contact. And I thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
So one of the coolest things for me so I worked in a daily English newspaper in Syria, and I got to learn how it's very important when we speak to a collective to address anything that is timely. Time was very important. So on this caravan, some global events that were unexpected unfolded out of nowhere. It's okay. So on this caravan, we're cruising thanks to our superheroes that were driving all across the road. Suddenly, what happens? Guesses. Give me a guess. Global event that happened that was unexpected. Huh? Weather? No. It includes a helicopter. A helicopter crashing. The Iranian president. That was one thing. Second thing, some trial in the U.S. Anyone heard of a trial in the U.S.? The Trump trial in the U.S.? Big event happening at the same time. Today, I think Ellen was saying something in India. I think Modi lost majority or something happened. Again, big news. So for me, as this caravan is unfolding and we're on the road, out of a sudden, there's this big things that are happening that we didn't expect. We had tornado alarms. We were afraid to be, stuck in well, we were stuck in thunderstorms. We saw forest fires. We had what was the thing that exploded on the first day on the way to Kelowna? Like an oil tanker, so like all across the road there was these big things that were unexpected. But for me, and also as we have been speaking, like whomever is going to watch the documentary at some point into the future, hopefully those will help them understand. It's like a timestamp. There's a timestamp when that helicopter crashed. We were on the road between event of X city to X city. And so for me, having those big things come to help me remember when things happened was one of my highlights. For regardless of what happened, whomever died, may they rest in peace and may it all be for good, but kind of just acknowledging those big events. Yeah.
I think the other thing that just comes to me that we've all been part of is that Biden has said that Netanyahu has to accept the ceasefires. And that's because of all the groups, all of us as individuals, all over the world, standing up and not giving up, month, week, day after day after day. So I just have to really acknowledge everyone in this room for standing up and not being afraid to call for ceasefire, not being afraid to stand up to Netanyahu and Biden's terrible position forever, and this frighten of the rise of the right wing in the United States, and so many other things. But you've stood in principle. Each one of you here, I know, has tremendous principle, and you don't give up. And I come out of that in my family too. I wore the NDP nuclear disarmament button when I was a kid. But it's because of the vision and the strength of each one of us that there might be a future. And maybe there's going to be a future for those kids in Gaza. And the movie we discovered, which was 1.5 Degrees of Peace, highly recommend it, ties militarism to climate change. And Films for Philistine is a great group. Films for Philistine, Google them. And they've got all kinds of amazing films that they've got out of people that have worked in Palestine or given information out, and somebody else has worked it up into a film. And all of these resources, Ed is handing out some of them here, but we'll keep putting them up on our website because there are many, many, many ways we can rise up for peace. And that's what's happening all over the world right now. And each one of us here is part of it. So we're really honored to be standing with you tonight.
Hello. I don't know why Syrians are the loudest in this room, eh? All right. Yeah, my name is Noor. I'm a Syrian, Canadian artist, human being, father, entrepreneur. And I befriended Ed here at Abstractions a while ago. And Ed, being the president of the Regina Peace Council, educated me about the important work that's being done with the World Peace Councils and the opportunity of such a precious institution preserved throughout history. And that is to give us a non-partisan view on history, because I think a part of the problems we have in the world is our subjectivity, coming from different upbringing, coming from different places, and that's been the history of the world. It's always been different. It's always been rise and falls of different power structures and wars, and but through all of that chaos rises certain principles that allows human beings to come together and share a common reality. And that's what the Peace Council represents for me. So through Ed, I've had the honor of hosting your group. Thank you very much for coming through. It's been a very enlightening night of information. I think, seeing other people doing the work, seeing the strength of each one of you, and the talent, and the determination is great hope. All that is needed is finding more the commonality of what it means to be a human being, and then maybe we can transcend our looks and our colors and wherever we come from, whatever ideologies we have, because that's the source of it all, right? And that's how we make peace happen, because it's war because we're not organized and they are. It's as simple as that. And I think that's what the peace movement is doing, is organizing people. So thank you so much for coming through and for giving me the chance to introduce myself and giving you this short story. Sabe?
Could you tell us where are we? Like the name of this place?
Yeah, this is called Abstractions Cafe. And Abstractions Cafe was our immigration business when we moved to Canada 23 years ago. So this is how we got to Canada in the profile of an entrepreneurship. So, yeah, in Regina, Saskatchewan. Thank you.
I just think I would be remiss if I did not say, give a special thanks to Noor and his parents. We could not have a more wonderful place to have these discussions than this cafe. Anytime I have a proposal for public peace discussion, I know if I come to Noor and his parents, the answer will be yes, of course. So thank you very much, Noor, and please pass on our thanks to your parents. This, I think, has been a very wonderful, special evening. Thank you.